We've all heard the saying that you want to work on your business, not in your business, but it's a really difficult thing to do, especially when you're first starting out. You may feel like you don't have time to bring someone on or to hire them. You feel like you may not have the budget for it. You feel like you don't know how to be a leader. You don't know how to trust people. You don't know how to manage people or set up a system and a process so that the tasks get done without you having to worry about it. This is all part of growing a business. But here's the thing. I started my business because I wanted financial freedom and time freedom. And you can't have time freedom if you don't run your business like a well-oiled machine. But it also makes it really difficult to have the financial freedom if your business is a train wreck, if you have to do everything. Now, when I got started in business, I also wanted to do it so that I could have more time with my family, take nicer vacations, spend more time with them. But as my business started to grow, I found it really difficult to be both a present business owner and a present parent. I have since found that balance, but it's a very difficult thing to walk. It's a very fine line to walk. It's a very hard path to walk. Well, today's guest has figured out how to do that, and she has multiple businesses. So this conversation, what we're going to do is talk about how do you start to outsource stuff? How do you run your business like a well-oiled machine? How do you set up systems and processes? What tasks should you be doing first when you get into systems and processes? But more importantly, how do you be a totally present parent and raise a family at the same time with growing a business? That's exactly what this episode covers. So if you're ready for that, well, keep on listening. But I do have one note before we get rolling here. I didn't realize it when we recorded the episode, but my fancy mic that you might see right here that I'm talking to right now wasn't turned on during this episode. So it is the computer audio that was captured. It is not the highest quality, but it is still totally understandable. You can read it. You can listen to it. Well, you can't read it because it's a podcast, but you can listen to it. You can understand it. But there is a little bit drop in quality during this podcast episode on my end. I apologize, you guys. We'll definitely double check that in the future. But either way, I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. I have an amazing interview for you. This is a topic that I've been slowly introducing to the podcast, and we've had some people like Carrie Green come on and talk about how to raise a family while building a business. But I'm really, really excited about today's guest, because today's guest specializes in systems, processes, being able to delegate, and how to run a business without it sucking up all your time, which is absolutely vital to running a business while having a family. Today's guest is Stacy Tuschl. So Stacy, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Brandon. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you were able to come on, and I'm really grateful for your time, because I know you specialize in delegating and like setting up systems and processes, and your product is called, is it well-oiled systems or machine?
Well-oiled operations.
There we go. Love it.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, like, this is one of the biggest things that I dealt with and I'm still dealing with. I feel like every level every revenue level has a new level of operations you have to deal with. But for me, some of the biggest lessons around this have always come to balancing like being a parent and being the business owner. And I know a lot of our audience is kind of stuck at this level where they're kind of ready to be building like systems and team. And a lot of them also have kids, and they're not really sure what to do. Some of the biggest concerns are kind of like, well, I have money coming in, but I don't know if I can afford a team, or like, what do I delegate first, or any of that sort of stuff. So can we just dive off there? Like, just to start there, and just like that 6-figure person who's just getting started, what are the first steps?
Yeah. So first, I think just realize you are leaving money on the table by not hiring. You are also forcing yourself to work way more than you have to. Like, just like that, that's the biggest thing. So I teach that you should only hire people that directly increase the revenue in your business or indirectly increase your impact. So let me explain like those two differences are. So for instance, let's say you're really bad at collecting money. I've actually had clients who like don't invoice people.
Gosh.
They do all this work and it's like, hi, could you bill me? I'm like waiting for you to bill me. You could literally hire somebody just to be like your money collector, your invoice collector, the person that, the credit card declines, but you don't reach back out. Like some business owners are so busy, they're not even reaching out to declines coming through on the credit card. Okay. So bringing somebody on who's actually going to directly make the company money doesn't actually cost anything. Okay. Another way that you could directly impact the revenue is I had another client who never reached back out when somebody finished the service with them. Okay. So they would hire you, you would fulfill on it. And then she would think, well, if you wanted me to work with me again, you would message me back. So she like never followed up and tried to get another sale. Okay. And I said to her, if you just hired somebody to go email every single person you've ever sold to reactivate them, I'm like, how much do you think you could make? Right. She figured out that she could make this person's entire month's salary back in the first week she started. Okay. First week. Cause she was like, oh my goodness. Like we were talking about, let's just do the math. You hire somebody for 10 hours a week. And I think she might even said like, if 5 hours a week, an hour a day if this person emailed her previous clients. So let's go there. 5 hours a week, $20 an hour, $100, right? Let's double it. Go to 10. So, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, she could make, I said to this person, I'm like, how much do you think you could make? And she said, well, one order is $400, like one person coming back to me, right? So all of a sudden I showed her this and she's like, I need to hire this person tomorrow, right? Like this is how fast somebody could be making money. So directly impacting the revenue, okay? We just hired somebody who came on the team and he negotiated with our CRM for a percentage that they were taking off of our like Stripe fees. So on top of Stripe fees, they were taking a percentage. And it went from 1% to 0.5%. We are a pretty large multiple 7-figure a year company. That was multiple 5 figures a year he saved. And this was within 30 days of employment. Okay. So, and this is where you have to understand. It's like, I know it's a big deal to think, oh my goodness, how can I afford somebody? And people think, okay, let's say part-time, this person's going to cost me $25,000. Their mind is saying, I don't have $25,000. But you have to remember, you aren't prepaying $25,000 for the year, right? You are paying for like 2 weeks at a time. And I always tell people, I either get them up and running and producing revenue, or we coach them up or we coach them out, right? So you're never going to pay somebody who's not good for an entire year, because within 90 days, you're already going to say to them, this isn't working, okay? So that is a part where don't be worried about the finances, okay? So the other one is indirectly making the company money, which means if you wanted to hire an assistant and they were not really going to be working with clients, they weren't collecting money, there's really no way for them to make the company money. If they're going to free you up, Brandon, for an hour a day or 2 hours a day, the question is, how much more valuable does Brandon get? How much more money do you make? And you should cover your assistant's salary. So I make enough money to pay my assistant salary because of what she takes off my plate. Does that make sense?
100%. So like, I'm just like even taking this advice into my own situation, because one of the things like, we were talking before the episode of like building out a sales team and all this stuff. And it's kind of been a challenge because I was doing the calls in the beginning and I was just like, I could close them, no problem. But then when we brought on a sales team and a closer, is like, we're changing closers and this and that. And like sales are kind of getting lost and stuff like that. And part of me was like, I should just hop back in, but I'm looking at my schedule. I'm like, I have too many like coaching calls and stuff. But I'm like, now I'm thinking indirect would have been like, well, can a coach do those to free you up for sales calls? And then now the company's making a lot more money that way.
Totally. And here's the thing. Sometimes it is going to go down in the beginning, right? So like when I transitioned out of sales, right? It is going to go down in the beginning a little bit, but then my job is to coach that person to be as good as me, right? So yeah, it might be a temporary sacrifice of I'm going to lose a little bit, but man, in 3 months, 6 months, when this person's on fire and I get to go do my own thing, it's going to be worth the payoff.
Well, I love the conversation of directly too. And do you recommend starting with hiring people that are directly impacting revenue or indirectly? Or does it not matter?
It does matter. It's really based on the business. So here's a couple things. If you see, if I just shared something and you go, oh my goodness, I'm leaving money on the table. I am the person not collecting money. I am the person not going back for the sale. Then maybe directly makes sense for you because you can just hire somebody and have them do it. But if you're somebody who's been doing those things, right? And maybe not doing them that well, where all of a sudden you would spike another, burst of revenue, you might be better off saying, I'm going to delegate what I know I can teach and train, and I'm going to free myself up to get better at sales. I'm going to free myself up to be better at messaging and marketing or whatever it is. So I think everybody is different, right? You have to look at, like I always say, make the math work, right? So if I think, if I hired somebody to do this, okay, what do I think that's going to produce? What kind of revenue? So we just hired a director of customer success. It was a very large salary, bigger than I've ever pulled out. And I was very, very scared, but I made the math work. I said to this person, right now, retention is X per month. I need to see you by month 6, bringing in this much for me to say, I don't regret this decision. And for me to say, this was a phenomenal decision. I would love to see it go to here. So she knows those numbers before she ever started in the company, right? Most people don't set the tone. They don't set the expectation. They're just like, you got the job. And then the person is thinking, okay, great. Well, you're responsible for paying me. I am very different. I'm like, by the way, I don't pay you. You produce revenue and you pay yourself, right? You have to be valuable in the company.
I think it's so smart. And I think that's where a lot of people, because I didn't we run our company very similar to that now, but I didn't used to do that. And what I actually found is it started to create a lot of entitlement with employees, where it's like, I should get a raise because I've been here X amount of years. And it's like for us, we've been at like a $2 million level for a couple of years now. And I we started to switch things around, but it's like, if I have the certain amount of team and they keep getting raises and bonuses, but the revenue in the business is staying the same, that's going to stop at some point. Like, it can't keep happening. So you have and that's one of the biggest switches we made, is like a lot of these roles are KPI or result-based, performance-based, stuff. And so am I correct in understanding that your client success manager is responsible for renewals and stuff like that inside the company?
Yeah. So four things: renewals, reactivations, which is like old people coming back, right? Old clients coming back, referrals, and then upsells. So she's like the head of the coaching department. So she's working with those coaches to get better results for our clients, better results for them, right? Better KPIs, things like that.
Got it. Okay, great. And the direct stuff is also really important too, because I remember a time in our business where we would do we had a ton of launches going on a couple of years ago. And people would come on payment plans. And I remember one month thinking, the revenue doesn't seem right. And I went and looked back, and we had almost $20,000 in failed credit card payments. And I was like, oh my God. And then that's what we did, is we had a company come in and help us with it. Now it's all internal. And we have an 80% recovery of credit card failed payments now. And the level we're at now, that's more than enough to pay for someone's salary just to handle that. And those are things that are so easily overlooked that I don't think people talk about enough. So I love that.
We just hired somebody to be in charge of affiliate partnerships. So she is going to figure out people that make a lot of sense for us. For instance, we partner with a specific funnel company. We partner with a specific QuickBooks, right? Monday.com, things like that, where she is actually looking at how, I said to her, for this position to work, you have to make more money than we pay you, right? Right? That is what we have to do. Now, to really work, and for us to say, this isn't just break even, we want to see her 2X, 3X, 4X her salary. And we do put KPIs and commission structures in place for her to be incentivized.
I love that. So what level do you think people need to be at to start incorporating some of the direct and indirect things? Is it beginning? Is there a certain revenue level? Or
it depends how fast you want to grow. I've seen people hold on. Somebody once said, I didn't start really hiring people until I hit $1 million. I'm like, that just tells me you were miserable, working all the time, doing everything in your business. You do not have to. Okay. When I came, so I have brick and mortar businesses. I have dance and music schools, and I've been doing that for 21 years. When I came into this business, I wasn't making any money at the time, right? I was brand new. I hired somebody immediately before generating any income because I wanted to go fast, and I didn't want to lose every weekend and every weeknight. I want to eat dinner with my kids every night. I want to be with them on the weekends, right? So for me, it was I will temporarily sacrifice a little bit of cash to get some help, but then I'm going to make sure that that person gets my support in making money so I don't have to keep paying her. She's going to keep paying herself.
Yeah. And what was that first hire? Do you remember?
The first one was really just like almost like a virtual assistant, a little bit of like jack of all trades. And that's usually what I think a lot of people do. It's more of like an administrative assistant type hire where they will really just be able to do a little bit of anything.
Yeah. I think it's great because that's kind of what I tell a lot of our students too is, like look at these things that are your biggest time sucks. Like, do you really need to be logging into Instagram and posting something? And I'm like, just add it up. Like, just do a time check. Add up like how much time you're spending on these like stupid tasks that you don't really need to be doing. And then look at the cost. Can a virtual assistant be doing that? Look at the cost of the virtual assistant. And then sometimes you were like, that's still too much for me. And I said, well, let's take that time back. And if you just focus on sales, I'm like, I don't care if you walk door to door selling a program or whatever, you're going to make more money than what it's going to cost to hire that person. And people just don't look at it that way.
No, you can hire part-time. I mean, literally just do the math on 5 hours, $20 an hour, $100 a week. For $400 a month, you can get help. If that is out of your budget, you can hire a Filipino VA for even less. And when people say oh, don't take jobs out of the United States, but you just said you can't even afford $400 a month. You're not taking any jobs. What's going to happen is you're going to hire an amazing Filipino VA. They are going to help you grow the business, and you'll actually have the funds to go hire jobs in the United States.
I hate that objection so much of jobs out of the United States. It's if your business is at a point where you need people and you can't afford, because it's expensive to hire people. If you haven't hired someone in the States, it's really expensive. And then there's also taxes beyond just their salary that you also have to pay on top of that. But by hiring virtual assistants, I was able to build a team inside of the United States. And I just look at it as human to human. I'm just I'm helping people, making their lives better. It doesn't really matter. A lot of the listeners are on the same page too. So I remember James would tell me he'd get that objection all the time. He's just
I still do. I still do for sure.
It's well, that's how you want to run your business and just then be miserable for a couple of years until you can hire someone in the States.
Yeah. And honestly, you just won't be able to afford it as early as somebody who would, right? So if that's your objection, totally get it. Just know you're going to be putting in more time until you can get the money back.
Totally makes a lot of sense. Okay. So how do you, if I understand the direct and the indirect stuff, but when someone comes on board, is there any great practices or ways of making sure that they're doing things correctly, not doing things incorrectly, and how do you start to even manage that? How do you manage the performance and things like that?
Yeah. So we do set the expectation immediately when coming on. So if a new salesperson came into our company, we have a couple rules, guidelines basically of week one. If you get 10 people to show up, we are looking for 1 sale out of 10. If you do not, it is a very good chance it's over that week. I know I'm going to sound oh my goodness, you fire in 7 days. Yes, I do. And if you're not closing at 20% minimum by the end of 30 days, you won't be able to stay with us. And honestly, I mean, here's the thing. They get they get their pay based off of their performance. They can't even financially stay for themselves if they're not performing because they're not going to be making money. So we just want to make sure it's a good fit and we have the right people. We move very quickly. Our businesses double revenue many, many times in a row. If you can't move fast, it's just going to be really hard to work here. So we're very honest. We're very upfront. And then, I'm coaching them in real time. So I'm not just saying have expectations and then fire them when they don't hit it. When I see, oh, wow, this isn't working or someone's not doing well, I'm coaching. So here's a great example. I always tell people, I might break my own rules if I see you're really coachable and you take feedback and you change it the next time. Okay. So I had somebody who I think is really good, but he did the same mistake 3 times in a row. And I said to him, here's my problem. You didn't close this week, but more so, you're not listening to the feedback I'm giving you. I am busy. And I'm auditing your calls to help you. And you're not making the changes I'm suggesting. Okay. So I just said, it might be a really short stay if you do not start making changes. And he just needed to hear that. And the next one, he aced it. Right. So sometimes we're afraid to be honest. So we don't say anything. And they think, Brandon didn't say anything. I must be doing a good job. Right. So they keep doing what they're doing versus like my person stepped it up and he needed to if he wanted to keep the job. So you've got to be honest, and you can say it in a kind way, right? You can say it and still get a great reaction. And him saying, thanks for being so honest, because a lot of bosses aren't honest, right? And then they just get fired and they have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. As I was going to say, they get fired and they have no idea what's going on. And especially when it comes to sales, because that's the biggest thing we've learned is it's really is like, just fire fast. It's very KPI driven. And that's part of the reason why it's been a struggle for us to like build the sales team to the level of where we want, is because we just kept people on for way too long. And then when there was one example where we would have a talk just very similar to what you were talking about. And then all of a sudden sales would come in and then they'd go right back to where they were again. It's like, if we wanted sales, we had to have a talk. And it's like, you can't keep doing this cycle anymore. So that makes a lot of sense. Is this related to what you said earlier, the coach up versus coach out sort of philosophy?
Yes, everybody. Yep. It's like, we are very honest. We put people on performance improvement plans, which is like a 30-day type thing of like, hey, hard conversation. We're not seeing what we're looking for. So we've got a 30-day process where we're going to start to really watch certain things, give you things to work on. And it's either like we're coaching them step up, or we're literally coaching them to say, all right, it's time to leave, right? It's just isn't working.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people listening are probably like, that's hard for me to do. Like that's in the beginning, it would have been for me as well. Is that something that you've always done, or is it kind of grew into being able to have that sort of communication? How did that process look?
I used to be the worst at firing. Here's my favorite firing story is the girl. I sugarcoated it so much that I thought she knew she got fired, and she came back the next day and I had to fire her a second time.
Oh my gosh.
I was that bad because I just felt so bad, and they're nice and they're a good person, but right. So I would not be direct. I would not be honest. And then it doesn't help them. She was mortified when she realized she was fired yesterday, and then she came back to work. Right. So I was horrible. It was never something that came natural to me. It still stinks. Like when I know I have to fire somebody, I still hate having to do it. But for me, I think I just finally realized I'm hurting the business. Like I'm stealing from the business when I allow bad behavior to continue, right? So it's like the profit is tanking. I feel it personally because I'm losing that money. My team maybe isn't getting a raise because somebody on the team is not an A player and they're draining the profit. So just in general, it's like, man, it hurts everybody, including them, if they're not the right fit.
Yeah. And that's the thing I've noticed too, through either people quitting or getting fired. Because I still like some of the people, one of the biggest lessons I learned is just not letting even emotional attachments make decisions. There are going to be people we've kept on board because I'm like, I just really like this person. But I knew for like 6 months they weren't the right fit. And then when you finally have that conversation and they leave, I stay in contact with friends on Facebook, Instagram, and they find something else that was like a much better fit for them. And then they're thriving. And it's just a better situation altogether. Like, yeah, it's a difficult conversation, but I find when we look at it through the lens of it's actually going to be better for both parties when we separate, it makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you, I'm a little jaded because I've now had employees for 17 years. And I've not fired people thinking like, well, they're not that good, but they are nice and they're so loyal and they've been here for, they're everything. Like there were people where when the pandemic happened and I had a physical location, we were shut down. I still paid people even when they weren't working because I felt bad and and I would never do that to them and all of that. But what's funny is a couple, weeks later, I had people quit on me immediately saying, yeah, now that the pandemic's here, like, I don't want to do this. And it's like, I just paid you for 6 weeks while you weren't working because I cared about you. And now you're like, sorry, this is the hardest moment of your life with a brick and mortar shutdown, but I'm out with like today's notice, right? And I just realized like, wow, they're putting themselves first, right? All the time. We have to put the business first, right? We can't be jaded by thinking they're a nice person.
Right. And if the business starts to suffer, then everyone loses. Like you as a business owner loses, the employees lose, all of that stuff. Like they're going to lose their jobs anyway. So it's like, it just might as well have that hard conversation and get going.
And hard conversation that could lead to them stepping up and being amazing and we've had performance improvement plans go well where they stay and they just didn't realize they were maybe not performing or they needed more support and then we could give it to them.
Right. makes a lot of sense. We've also had people move around in the company too, just from like different roles where it's like, oh, it's okay. Now they're in this role and they're thriving. Like not only are they thriving performance wise, but they're just happier too. Like there's a different energy about them as well. Okay, great. So let's move the conversation a little bit into like building a business while having a family, because I know you've had multiple businesses. You've been an entrepreneur for a lot of years, and I know you've had all those businesses while raising a family. What does that process sort of look like? Have there been moments where you've had to work and you wish you didn't, or has it always just been everything's been perfectly systemized and you've been good to go? What does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty good today, but there are still moments where it's like mom has to jump in here and do something, right? Like, got to get in the office, like, got to take this call. Like, we were on vacation yesterday and my lawyer called. I need to take that call. I stepped away, right? It's like there are going to be some moments where I still am sacrificing, but it's not anywhere near what it used to be, right? Like back in the day, I started my second business at the worst possible timing ever. We were building this house that we're living in right now, which building alone is a nightmare. At the same time, we were building a commercial, like a 7,000 square foot commercial building at the exact same time, while opening up my second business, which means I was broke and running out of money and trying to fund it and figure out all of the things, right? So that's how I started Well-Oiled Operations. And my point was, Tegan, my youngest, was literally born that same year. So in the same year, we built two houses, or a house and a building, had a baby, started a new location, all the things, right? And yeah, it was a nightmare. So like back then, I would put her to bed and then I would get back on my computer, right? And then I may be on my laptop while she's like playing around. Like there were definitely moments in the journey where I probably wasn't the most proud mom, like if I could look back and see it, but I always knew like this temporary sacrifice was going to pay off. Now, my kids are still young. They're 8 and 10. And I feel like the things I did back then, I now have the freedom, the flexibility to be very involved. So I really do at night when they come home from school, like the computer never comes out. On the weekends, I am not working unless it's like a very rare situation where I have an event next week and I have to prep something last minute, right? It's very rare that they're going to see me working. So I think there are seasons and stages to your business and your life, right? And you have to decide like, what am I in? The problem, you never get out of the hustle season, right? Hustle should be temporary, and it should not be, I've been hustling for 8 years or 10 years, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. I hear sometimes people, like even some of our students, I'll look through their numbers and their funnels and I'm like, this funnel's great. And like, what's the problem? And they'll say things like, well, if I take more sales calls, I'll be working too much. Or if I'm doing this, I will be like, if I make more sales, then the fulfillment will be too much for me to handle. And I just I want to like be there for my kids and have this work-life balance. But I'm not kind of on the same page with you, is that there are seasons, like you're a business owner and there's going to be times where, yeah, we're going to have to work nights and maybe we have to sacrifice a weekend or something like that. But you have to look at it through the lens of this is a temporary thing, and also probably could still happen if you had a normal career or job. Like that's just part of the thing. The goal is to make sure that you understand this is a temporary thing and that it's not going to last forever. But to like piggyback off that, when you're in one of those like busy stages or seasons, do you explain it to your kids? Like when you're on vacation, you have to take a call. Do you just say like, mommy has a call and you leave? Or do you like explain like what's going on? How do you handle that?
Yeah, because especially when your kids are little, they're so honest and they just like say things and you're like, oh, I can't believe she just said that to me. So I remember one time when one of them said like, oh, mom, you work all the time or you're working so much or something. And I have a vision board in my office. And I came over and I said, okay, do you see like this picture and that picture? And we have like a Disney cruise on there and like a vacation home in Florida and like all of these things, right? I just explained like mom works hard and it pays off where we get opportunities, right? Like we get to go experience certain things. So then we did a vision board together. What do you want to see on that vision board, right? Like what would you like, when we hit this next big milestone, what should we do as a family? And it was so funny. We were talking, my husband and I were talking about like maybe a launch or something we were going to do. And it was probably going to be like, I don't know, like $500,000 or something, right? And we didn't tell them the numbers. They would have no idea what that means. But we said, okay, when we hit, X amount of students in this, Actually, what I did was, this was really cool for kids. I have a book, a physical book, and I wanted to sell 50. Shouldn't say 50 books. I give a book away when somebody buys my program. We give a box, we throw the book in there. So we visually put 50 books on our breakfast bar in our kitchen. And we said, when mom and dad sell 50 books, which means programs, what should we do to celebrate? Okay, now this is like $500,000. We have a $10,000 program. And they were like, we're going to go to Olive Garden. I'm like, okay, sounds good. And like, we really did like celebrate and like go to Olive Garden, because like to them, like it was this huge celebration, right? So like get them involved, get them. And like, so mom's working hard and I'm like, guys, I just sold 2 books. And they're like, yay, like we're getting closer to the end. So they're like in it with me. And that was really, really fun and special.
That's really powerful. And like, that I think but I know James, you heard it through James. We both work with a shaman named Don Javier. And I remember when I had a conversation with him one day, and he just tells me, he's like, I don't think you recognize it, but you compartmentalize your entire life. And I was like, what do you mean? I don't get it. And he's like, you go in your office and you're like business owner, then you come out and then you're like dad. And then you come then you go do your meditation and you're like spiritual guy. And then he's like, but none of them are ever blended together. And it took me so long to understand what he meant. And I think what you just described is a beautiful example of integrating things together. And that's what I started doing recently. Like when I would talk at an event or something like that, I like bring the family, because my wife says, I'm like, let's just go. And then I'm like, I want them to see me on stage, like have them come out there so they can understand what it is I do. And then when I post videos, I'm like, I show them the Instagram. I'm like, here it is. And I just posted this beautiful clip that I made a couple years ago. Actually, my team posted it. I made a couple years ago talking about how your kids are watching you and what example are you setting for them? And it kind of reference what you're talking about is like, yeah, working hard, you may have like guilt around it, but it's also showing the example of working hard and achieving something. But if you don't make them aware of like you're working hard to achieve something, the whole message is lost. And so I remember having this beautiful message and I showed it to my kids and they both started crying. Like a 10-year-old and 8-year-old or 7-year-old started crying. I was like, what are you crying for? And they're like, we didn't realize that you were doing this for us. And I said, you guys are my biggest inspirations. And then they started crying even more. I was like, it was such a beautiful moment. But I think as parents, we have these beautiful opportunities to set these examples and reframe it, because I see people in guilt all the time of like, I'm just working so hard and I don't, get time with my kids. I'm like, well, if you integrate these together, you get to set a beautiful example for your kids. And I think that's such a great example of what you've been able to do.
When my youngest turns 10, so all the 10 and 12-year-olds, I told them I'm going to have them start to come to my conferences and like sit at the table and start learning. The 8-year-old's a little too wild and outspoken to be like in that room yet by herself. But pretty soon I do want them there. I want them hearing, entrepreneurs with big goals and doing big things. And I want them seeing like what's possible and seeing all different types of people and different types of strengths in that room. So I really think we have a really powerful opportunity to show them that.
We do. And that's, to be honest with you, it's one of the reasons why I started the podcast is because like, for me, I'm the same way. I want to expose them to it. I don't want to indoctrinate them to it. Like I want them to find their own path. Like if my son Will comes to me, and this might be very possible because that's just how his mind works. He's like, I just want to be an engineer or architect or something. Like, dude, if that makes you happy, go and freaking do it and just be the best you can at it. But the problem is that like the school systems, like the traditional public school system, they don't expose kids to this stuff. They don't expose it to this world or big dreams and big goals. And I think just having that exposure to it would change the game for a lot of people. And so I think that's really powerful.
And it, like my kids do go to a traditional school. And, my kids right now, they both want to be teachers. And what did I want to be when I grew up? A teacher, because their role model that they love is their teacher, right? So it's like, of course, everybody wants to be a teacher when you're young, right? And for me, I love that. I want them to be exposed to it, but I also want them to see other options and other ways and let them make an actual decision because they have decisions and opportunities, right?
Yeah. You referenced your husband a couple of times. You said does he work with you in the business now?
We haven't talked in a little bit. So Kent retired from the SWAT team. He was in Milwaukee SWAT team. December of 2019, which was the absolute best timing ever because, as you know, like the pandemic in March, and I was all hands on deck with the pandemic. It was really interesting. You know, my online business blew up in March of 2020, while my other businesses plummeted, right? So you've got all of the small business owners hurting. They wanted to hire me. And then my brick and mortars were closed. And I was going like a crazy person, just trying to like, again, a season. I got sucked in so hard. I was working nonstop. And thankfully, my husband was able to homeschool them while we were not in school. So I could be full time. I mean, I worked probably 12-hour days because we were just trying to save the business.
Wow. That's intense. I can't imagine having a brick and mortar business while going through COVID and all this stuff. Cause it's hard because it feels so out of I would imagine it felt so hard out of your control. Like there's nothing you can do. Like I always say there's a solution to everything. Like, you know, especially having a dance studio, I'm like, I don't know what else there is to do. It's just like, we're shut down and I don't know. Like, I know it's not even related to parenting, but how'd you guys get through that?
Yeah. So you use your strengths, right? You use what you know. And the good news is I had been building an online business and I had worked on Zoom for many, many hours a day for many, many years. So I said to my team immediately, why don't we do Zoom classes? And they were like, what is Zoom? I mean, literally my entire team was like, what is like dance teachers are like, I don't know what Zoom is. And I'm like, I've been working on Zoom for like a decade minimum, right? So anyway, I go into the business. I don't ever work in my studios, but I went in that weekend. I had my core team come in. I literally taught everybody how to use Zoom, like 101, like how to record myself. And we announced within 48 hours that we were keeping, because remember at the time we thought we were closed for like 2 weeks or a week, right? So it was really kind of cool because all my competitors were like, we don't know Zoom either. So none of my competitors did virtual and I was running virtually within 48 hours. And then what was amazing was that our kids were always in session and my competitors had to start figuring out, how do I refund? We're not actually getting back in session. What do we do? So some of my competitors never went virtual. Some finally did it like 2 weeks later, 4 weeks later. So we were the only studio that did it quick. And then because we never quit, we were able to put on an outdoor dance recital, which again, so for me, I was like, these kids are getting a recital. They have been through so much. The recital is their favorite time. We are not taking it away. So I'm like, guys, I don't care what you need to do. My PAC was shut down. I'm like, find me a church, find me a grass area in a park. I do not care. And because of that, we were the only studio that kept going. We just called and called and called. And we finally got an outdoor pavilion with like an open pavilion. So it was not inside, but it was covered. So we literally put on outdoor recitals. We're the only ones that did it. And to me, it was like, we were resourceful. Like we were not going to stop. And that's why we made it through.
Well, it goes back to what I guess what I was saying earlier is I guess there is a solution to everything and you just have to figure it out. But yeah, I remember going through that and watching some of these businesses and just being like, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Like that's just terrible. My last question too is about parenting and building a business and having businesses is like, do you ever get into guilt, like the mom guilt of either not spending time with them or having to sacrifice something? Actually, I have two questions. So that, and then if so, how do you overcome that?
Yeah, it was easier when they were little, but now they're old enough to be like, why do you have to go again? Like, why? What do you mean you're going on an airplane without me? Right? Like now they're vocal and they say that. The guilt for sure kicks in, right? But again, it's education. It's explaining to them, hey, like, first of all, mom doesn't have to do this. Mom likes to travel and I like to coach business owners. And part of our business model is we do 3 events a year. So mom is doing that kind of stuff, not because I have to. I get to, I'm excited. I actually am the boss and I decided to do those 3, right? So even because I don't want them to hear, oh, I have to go. Like mom's doing something she doesn't want to do. No, I put those on the calendar. I picked Florida. Like I'm the one in charge here, right? So I want them to see that. But I also want them to know, like, guys, there are parents that travel every week. Like I travel often and I'm not even close to like a frequent flyer because some people are traveling literally every single week. That is not my lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, I think too is the most amazing part in that is you're actually, my perspective on it is you're demonstrating following your passion. You're also demonstrating boundaries. You're also demonstrating like, this is what I get to do what I choose to do. And I think that's a really powerful thing for kids to say. Like, I, again, I don't want to come off as judgmental or anything like that to any of the listeners, but like, if in that scenario, you're like, you know what, mom's not going to do this anymore because you don't want me to, you're actually, in my opinion, kind of just teaching the kids that they can have whatever they want. They can, like, there is, I just say one thing and then my mom bends over backwards. And it's like, no, you, like, that shows a lack of personal power, in my opinion. But what you're demonstrating is a huge amount of personal power.
Yeah. Or demonstrating like how they should behave if they grow up and their husband doesn't want them to do something or their kids say something. I want them to still say, hey, well, listen, I know you maybe don't like this, but mom does. And here's what mom's going to do and all that. Now, if I ever thought it was like negatively impacting my children or I was gone too much, 1000%. I'm talking like 3 trips, 2 days spread out over the year. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 100%.
And I'm also being strategic on, I live in Milwaukee, so I'm definitely not bringing people here in the middle of winter, but like we purposely put our July event in Milwaukee. It's beautiful. The weather's nice. I sleep at my home when I have my events in Milwaukee. So I put on one of the events. I'm not even leaving. I just don't see them from 9 to 5 during the day.
Right. Yeah. I try to do the same thing too. Is like either have things in Sedona because we're like 30, 40 minutes away from there, or Phoenix, closer things, so I don't have to do as much. But yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. My last question too is really about like money with kids. This is a conversation I've had with Mel too, like when he introduced it to his son and that sort of thing, because, you know, we do deal with a good amount of money. And I asked, my kids have literally asked me like, are we millionaires? Like, are we poor? Are we rich? Are we this? Because they don't understand. The only context around money that they have is just us. And they don't know. So how do you handle a lot of the conversations with money with your kids?
Yeah. I'm very honest and upfront. Like, so when my daughter actually wants to be a Christian school teacher, okay, which I would assume would be even less money than a regular school teacher. I don't know, but I'm just assuming, right? So when she tells me that, I'm like, that's amazing. Like, okay, so now that you're thinking about like what you want to do, some things that you want to consider is like understanding, time, understanding money. So like one of my friends is a school teacher and one of her biggest complaints is she can never get off of school for vacations. She only gets to go on like spring break. And then she complains that spring break is so expensive because everybody's traveling and she doesn't make a lot of money. So then she's not even going on that trip, right? So like, I'm just explaining like, now money isn't everything. Like I wanted to be a professional dancer for a very long time. And I thought, I don't care if I make nothing. I just want to be in my passion and I'm going to be okay being a starving artist. If that's okay and you understand what you're getting into, I honor and respect that. But I think what happens is people don't know what they're getting into, right? So the biggest thing I've been telling, because man, our kids are growing up very different than my husband and I grew up. And like we always were like, oh, this is like scary, right? Like just like the things my children have done that I never did. Like my husband just said, he's 43. He's like, I am going to Paris for the first time as a 43-year-old, and our children are going as 8 and 10, and it's like their third country in Europe they've been to. Like, it's just like not even, So anyway, it really is. But we're letting them know, like, mom and dad didn't grow up like this, right? And there's nothing wrong with growing up like this or not like this, but it was a choice we made. And the career we chose gave us an opportunity to make a lot of money, so we're able to spend more. So like, if she chooses a job that is lower paying, again, nothing wrong with that, but you're not going to be taking trips like mom and dad. You're probably not going to have a second home in Florida. Like we're letting them know we own a lot of stuff because we make a lot of money. And it's up to them to decide what they want to do, but we really want them, like I'm not biased one or the other. I just need them to know like, here are your options and here's what you're getting into. Now you decide.
Yeah, it's almost identical to conversations that you and I are having with our kids, because that's kind of how we've been treating it too, is like we just took a 10-day trip in Hawaii and it was just like, nothing's off the table. We're going all out. It was like for my 40th birthday and it was like, this is...
That's my Paris trip is the 40th birthday as well.
Oh, it is? That's awesome. And, like even leading up to this, my kids did when we go, we stay at nice places. Let's say the Ritz-Carlton or the Four Seasons or whatever it is. And I remember we went to Bacara in Santa Barbara, and my daughter sits down at the pool and she goes, this is the life. Can we order like lunch and then get room service later? And I'm like, the hell? Like Jacqueline tells me if I said that to my parents, I would have got smacked. And I was like, I would have never said that. And I was just like, then I tried to find this balance of like, are we spoiling them? How do we have these conversations? And then this was years ago. So we were so much more intentional now of like, look, this is not normal. This is not normal. But it's kind of funny because we said the exact same thing. This was a choice we made 10 years ago when we had no money and we were living with Mima and Bipa, which were in-laws. And because we couldn't even afford a house, we couldn't afford rent, we couldn't afford anything, we made a choice to just go after it. And so now we have these nice things. And then it's also running that balance of like, just because someone has a different choice or a different life doesn't mean we're better, worse, whatever. It's everyone's equal. And so
I was gonna say one more thing that you just made me think of was we also share with them, like they're seeing mom and dad, we're 19 years into our relationship. So I'm like, if you would have seen mom and dad when we first got together, like we were making no money. We told them just recently, we're like, we bought a duplex. And we did that, like most people don't want a duplex for their first house, right? But we did that because we wanted the rental income. We wanted to start saving. We were driving like really old cars. Like we wanted them to know too, like we've sacrificed a lot to get here. So like when you turn 18, no, you're not getting a Range Rover and doing, you know what I mean? Like you're going to have to make some of those choices that like, got us here. So we just want them to see like what it's taken and how we've done it and the strategies. And also like letting them know, like once they get to high school, I really am going to look at like extra spending money is like, you want to start a business, you want to start doing that, go for it. I actually like the idea of like getting them like doing something to start to see like, what does it feel like to have a business? Would I ever want to do this? Just like a lot of people think about it. A lot of people make their kids get jobs. I'm like, I'm going to make my kids start a business in high school to see like what it feels like, right? It's no different than my mom making me get a job at 14. Same thing with my kids. And then at some point I want to make them get a real job because I do think I learned a lot by having a boss, by having, somebody else make me show up at a certain time and consequences when I didn't and things like that.
Well, also there's so much value in like having a bad boss and you're just like, wow, I really did not enjoy that experience. And it's like, you can learn through the negative sides of that too. It's kind of blown away because again, I have very similar conversations with my kids and my daughter, Lily, she's a firecracker. She's the one who was like, this is the life. Can we order room service? She also told me, I was like, Lily, what do you want to do when you grow up? And she's like, well, I'm just going to like inherit your money in mom's. And I'm like, no, you're not. No, you're not. I was like, I could just sign a piece of paper that says you don't get a dime of that. And I said, plus, like, we plan on being 80 or 100, which means you're going to be like 80. What are you going to do from like 20 to 80? That's 60 years. So she's this little firecracker, but at the same time, she will ask me like, well, can I start a business? What can I do? And I said, yeah, like the typical ones, like hot chocolate stands or lemonade stands. And I said, but think outside the box. Like, think of different ways to make revenue off of that. And she came with this genius idea. She says, I'll sell treasure maps. I'm like, what do you mean? And she says, I'll buy like little toys and I'll hide them through the neighborhood and I'll create a map of the neighborhood. And there'll be like a little toy in these spots. When people come to hot chocolate, I'll sell treasure maps for $2. And I was like, you came up with that all on your own? She goes, yeah, because you said, think of things this. I'm like, her mind is like wired for this stuff. And so had we not had these sorts of conversations, I don't even think she would even explored like how to think differently. So I think exposure is, like you mentioned, is really important.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of exposure, I had a friend where she's from LA. She grew up very wealthy and now she has a nice business and does well. And I said to her, I get nervous with my spending habits and my children watching. Because like I said, it's not how we grew up at all whatsoever. And she said, don't be. I grew up watching my parents and I always thought big and I always like knew I was destined for this. And she's like, I am the person I am because of what I saw. And she said to me too, I probably got there faster than you because I saw it was available versus me, small town in Wisconsin, didn't see it was available, right? And it took me a whole lot longer to build what I built today than a lot of people like jumping from, from the get-go in California, because you just see it. You don't see it where I'm from necessarily.
It's like almost like you're normal, it's like, this is just the way it is. And it causes you to take actions and have perspectives that are really beneficial. So that makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Well, Stacy, I appreciate you being on the podcast. This is such an awesome conversation. And if people want to learn more about you, where can they go?
Yeah, the two best places, podcast is Well-Oiled Operations. And then Instagram is just my name, Stacy Tuschl.
Cool. Stacy, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.